energetically, wherever we hide and wherever we play small, it dims our magnetism no matter what. And so being a perfectionist, is hiding from the fear of my perceived rejection for being myself.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Expanded Podcast. Jessica here. I am so excited for today's episode, but before we jump in, I wanted to share with you another story from the Motivation, which is our testimonial library. You can find hundreds and hundreds of testimonials from our members detailing how they manifested their various items. A link to it is in the show notes, but this is such a vital piece. Even if you're not manifesting what this member is manifesting, it will help you to see, to believe that what you are calling in is possible and come through after hearing that other people have manifested their lists as well. So this member was manifesting their dream job after their postgraduate school. They landed their perfect job after passing 3 major tests. What they were calling in was a curatorial role at either a museum or a nonprofit, a position that paid $45K or above with excellent benefits. They must support diversity, equity, and inclusion and have a diverse staff. They must have opportunity for growth where this person would be able to develop their curatorial career, and it was located in Denver with access to public transportation. So the workshop they used were Unblock Inner Child, Shadow, Full Moon, Unblock Money, and the Reinforcing Grace and Confidence DI. One of the biggest shame things that came up for them were shame around student loan and worried that they are not talented enough to be a curator, and also feel a fear of failure, which oftentimes comes up when we're calling in a career or financial manifestation. This member writes, I faced tests around job offers that were not aligned with my goals or lists at all. Tests in my relationships with transparency. Starting in February 2021, I started working through Unblock Money. In that time, I worked through shame around student loan debt and was able to share the truth with my partner. To my surprise, he was incredibly accepting, and we now have full transparency with our finances. Love and money are definitely connected, friends. Prior to this workshop, I felt like money was a huge awkward place for us. We are now in a good place, and around the end of February, I started getting callbacks for job interviews. The test came around my 27th birthday. My mom was visiting the same week. I had an interview with a ministry job I did not want and was not even remotely aligned with my career goals or salary requirements. I was distraught for about a week, anxious about turning it down, worried another opportunity wouldn't come through. I did the Reinforcing Grace and Confidence DI a lot during this period and proceeded to do it before each job interview. Once I turned that offer down, 2 days later, I had another interview offer come through for the perfect position, except it was going to require me to relocate and not be close to my family. Long story short, I emailed this job to decline the 3rd round interview. A few days after my second interview with the relocation job, the COO of a company I had my eye on and really wanted to work with reached out and asked me to apply for the perfect role. She said it would be a good fit, and I wholeheartedly agreed. The whole process from initial invitation to contract sign has taken 10 days. I was able to negotiate my salary and benefits and am ultimately in the best place I could be. I love this because it really highlights a couple of key themes in here. One, this magic dark period when you're passing these tests and your manifestation isn't quite coming through yet, to double down on your neural reprogramming work. It's so important to both reprogram and reinforce your worthy, authentic self and know that you can have the things that you're calling in. Almost if you wake up in the morning and hop into this on a regular basis to keep priming your subconscious and staying in that new neural pathway so it becomes the norm. The other thing I think is incredible is their patterning was so clear. One of their biggest things they were working through was this shame around student debt and a financial tie-in, feeling not good enough, fear of failure. And so once they were able to out their shadow by sharing their student loan debt with their partner, was received so well. 2 days after that, a new job opportunity pops up and she says no to that and a new one pops up. And then it's almost everything on her list except for the location piece. And she still says no because it really wasn't aligned with her, because it needed to still be in that location because she was calling something in from her core essence. And then the manifestation finally came through where they reached out to her. And if you kind of look at that timeline, when she doubled down on the money work, what seemed to be her biggest block, and then outed her shadow, discussed her finances with her partner, to when the manifestation come through, it was so short. It looks like almost a month, maybe. And so that's why, you're doing all of this neural architecture and unblocking for all these months before. You're laying the groundwork for these things to come through. But once that new thought pattern becomes the norm and you've unblocked so much and expanded, that you can now start calling in, and this is the sort of definition of the thing is orbiting around you. It was so close to her. It just needed her to stay in her worth, not settle for anything less, and then she was going to be connected to it. So if you want to hear more from this person, if you want to read their full entire manifestation story, we have that linked in the show notes as well, or check out the motivation for any other members you might want to be expanded by.
And now, a word from our partners. So over here at TBM, a lot of us have been going on and on about how much seed probiotic is blowing our minds. As someone who stopped any form of supplements about 1.5 years ago when I started the Bean Protocol, I was really enamored with our marketing director, Grace's take on seed probiotics, which started to open me back up to it again. And you've heard me talk about seed before, that I love that it's a 2-in-1 capsule in the sense that it's not like a typical non-science backed random thing you find on the health food store. It's gone through massive double-blind studies, and it's a 2-in-1 capsule, meaning that the outer part of it is a prebiotic, which not only feeds the healthy bacteria already living in your digestive tract, but it makes it all the way down past your bile and stomach acid to 100% arrive in your colon so that you receive the full spectrum of probiotic that it covers. And like I shared with you last time, I really started taking it to prepare for my Group B strep test, which is something that one takes in later pregnancy. And needless to say, that came up negative. I can't say that it was because of the product, but it was certainly a tool in my tool belt that I actively used to ensure that I hopefully would not have to be on antibiotics or any form of penicillin during my delivery. But what I really want to highlight about seed today that I think is phenomenal, and I don't think enough people are aware of this, because it's a subscription model, when you receive your first package, you get a glass jar and a glass bottle. So the glass jar, of course, is what you will continue to reuse each time you receive your new shipment of seed. You'll refill that glass jar, but they also give you a travel glass vial so that you can also pack that in anytime you're traveling. But here's the really, really crazy thing is the packaging is so sustainable that it's made out of biodegradable algae paper, which is 100% compostable. And the refills that you receive are also in that algae paper. So you can recycle them, compost them after you toss them into the glass jar every month. The pouch for refillables is made out of a popcorn, which is compostable, biodegradable, and literally even edible. So it's truly one of the greenest, most sustainable products out there. So not only is it completely science-backed, which is super unusual for probiotics, that it 100% makes it down to your colon and feeds healthy bacteria along the way. The lead scientist that they have on their science board was literally the guy who coined the term probiotic when it was first being discovered, and it's ultra chic. Not only all of that, but it's unbelievably sustainable. So if you're in the market to try a probiotic that actually works, is effective, is proven, go ahead and use the code TBM15, all caps, to receive 15% off your first month. Again, that's all caps TBM15 to receive 15% off your first month of Seed Probiotics. So when we made the decision to bring on partners to partner with on this podcast to take it to the next level, so that we could bring on even greater experts than we have recently, one of the main ones we've been talking about lately that I personally have been mentioning for the last 2 years is BlueBlox, the blue and green light blocking company. I have 2 episodes with the founder, Andy Mann, and I've shared that I own 4 of their products that I've bought with my own money. That's the yellow glasses for daytime when it's overcast or rainy. So if you live in the UK or the Pacific Northwest, it's especially good for you. The red glasses, which I wear at night after the sun goes down, as well as the clear glasses, which are meant for sunny days during the day. I also swear by, travel with, and use every single night their blue light blocking sleep mask. So of course it was a no-brainer to partner with BlueBlox. I know actually many people in this community already have some of the products. But one thing I want to highlight today is the last episode that I did with founder Andy Mann, where we really dove deeply into hormones, fertility, aging, so pure vanity of what blue light and green light are doing to our aging process, and educating on blue light in general. And that's linked below if you haven't heard that episode. It is so enthralling. But for perspective, just one thing that I want to bring to your attention is how blue light's affecting you in general. And one of the major ways that nobody's really aware of is that blue light and green light are emitting from most of the devices that you're using daily. Certainly your computer, your phone, but things you don't even realize, like the clock on your oven or the lights on your Wi-Fi device. They're everywhere. And in that episode, Andy gives a really good free tip to take duct tape and put it over all of the blue and green light in your house. So there was a recent study that he was sharing with me on the podcast, which tests the frequencies of how light disrupts melatonin production, which is vital for not only sleep, but for the total balance and circadian rhythm of all of our hormones. And the authors found a very distinct band of light that suppresses melatonin that's 400 nm to 550 nm. This is 100% of blue light. Green light runs from 500 to 570 nm. And the study showed that blocking 100% of green light up to 550 nm is always required for optimal melatonin secretion. So if you're somebody who suffers from any type of sleep troubles whatsoever, hormone issues, and you're noticing rapid aging, blue light blocking is vital for you. It certainly has been for me, who has dealt with fertility and hormone disruption now for years. So if you're not familiar with the ways that you can go ahead and mitigate this in our world where literally we're surrounded by blue and green light, especially in the evenings, may it be light pollution outside, street lights, in your car, even the screens in our car are affecting us. You're definitely going to want to tune in to BlueBlox and their array of products. They've really thought of everything so far that we can do to mitigate this light, and they're the only brand that's 100% backed by science. So if you want to learn more about BlueBlox, go ahead and check the link below, listen to that episode. It'll blow your mind. You'll notice your sleep transforming immediately, just starting with the glasses. And if you want to give any of their products a try, use the code ALLCAPSMAGNETIC, MAGNETIC, for 15% off your purchase. All right, on to the episode.
So today on the podcast, we're doing a really cool episode that we've been talking about doing for quite some time. And this is the topic that you guys write in about all of the time. It's something I definitely struggle with. And our TBM coach, Salwa Kyobe, who's going to be on the podcast with me, also struggles with a lot. Perfectionism and people pleasing. Whew, man. I mean, who doesn't have an element of this in their block somewhere? Salwa and I really dive into a checklist to identify where it shows up for you, how it shows up, how it may have gotten implanted. We have some teachings from Lacy peppered in there and really break down those that help synthesize what's going on when these blocks present, and also some hope of how to integrate and move past these blocks. And so we really break down the energetics behind perfectionism and people pleasing as it relates to manifestation, and how you can move through those blocks in order to call in what you are desiring. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have Salwa on, our TBM coach. I'm so excited. We're going to talk all things perfectionism and people pleasing. And we also have some intermix lessons and teachings from Lacy that we will dive into deeper within the episode. But this is truly something that has come up in our community group, in our DMs, on our comments. You know, everyone seems to, at some capacity, struggle with some semblance of perfectionism or people pleasing. And it really does impact manifestation in a big way, because it's us putting someone else's needs before our own and putting our self-worth in the opinions and feelings of others, which obviously can block our manifestation and block our magnetism. So we really wanted to dive into this. What is perfectionism? What is people pleasing? How can we notice when we're doing it? And how can we start to unblock so we're honoring ourselves and raising our self-worth? Welcome, Salwa.
Hi, I'm so excited. This is such a topic near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure so many who are struggling with this.
Yeah, you've shared about it in the Mighty Networks group, and then also on your own page as well, too. That also caught my eye because I know you have personal stories, and we'll get into it, about this topic as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it just keeps you from being like getting to know yourself. And so part of intimately having a relationship with who you are and your authenticity, you have to break perfectionism and people pleasing. Otherwise, you'll never get to the core of who you are and what you want.
Absolutely. So like our explained episodes, I'm also going to kick us off with a quote. It's a quote from Brené Brown, her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And the reason I'm kicking off with this is there's a lot of clinical definitions for perfectionism. A lot of them are like checklists. And I feel like Brené's definition here really lays the groundwork for what perfectionism is and isn't, because I feel like there is a bit of a kind of a misrepresentation of perfectionism as a badge of honor in a lot of ways, and I think she helps to debunk it. So Brené says, perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is not about healthy achievement or growth. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. It's a shield. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact, it's the thing that's really preventing us from taking flight. Perfectionism is not self-improvement. Perfectionism is, at its core, about trying to earn approval and acceptance. Most perfectionists were raised being praised for achievement and performance, grades, manners, rule following, people-pleasing, appearance, sports. Somewhere along the way, we adopt this dangerous and debilitating belief system: I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. Please, perform, perfect. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is other-focused. What will they think? And so you can kind of see from her definition here, healthy striving is how can I improve and be the best, most authentic version of self I can be. Whereas perfectionism is other focused. What will they think? And when we're talking about manifestation, when we're asking what will they think, we're putting our validation and our self-worth in the opinions of others instead of having that for ourselves. So, Salwa, kind of dive into what your relationship and understanding with perfectionism has been.
Yeah, and this was such a beautiful snippet. It's such a great example because, especially the shield part, right? When I used to glorify being a perfectionist, it's just a tactic to hide. And energetically, wherever we hide and wherever we play small, it dims our magnetism no matter what. And so being a perfectionist, is hiding from the fear of my perceived rejection for being myself. And authenticity and perfectionism, those are two different homes, two different islands. They can't really come together. And so one of them is really forcing us to be a machine. And the other one is allowing us to be human and to be fully ourselves. And so for me, perfectionism, it just strips away life. It really does. And the deeper I would go down it, the more it felt like I was just gasping for air. And it forces me to perform for another person or a job. But then not only just performing, then I'm like, okay, well, which perfect me needs to show up for this thing, which then leads to, of course, procrastination, especially around, starting anything new or unknown. Because if you're trying to be perfect, there's little joy in being just a beginner and being the student. It's just a race to be right, a race to get approval. And that can feel so defeating and cause us to not be able to take the next step forward.
Yeah, it really limits us in so many ways. And it's so interesting because I knew I was a perfectionist because of how I couldn't put things down, and I would ruminate on things when they weren't to my level or standard in my head, which after unpacking that through TBM work, I'm realizing that wasn't my level. That was this perceived level that I had from what I picked up from society or family or whatever it may be. But I really wore perfectionism as a badge of honor and thought it meant, well, if I'm a perfectionist, that means I'm really good at my job and I care about all of these things and I'll never let anything slip through the cracks. Like, you can really trust me because I'm a perfectionist. I'll make sure it's good. And it wasn't until I was in therapy and talking to my therapist about this, and she's like, you're in constant distress, anxiety. You are unable to leave work at work. You can't let things go. Like, this is not a badge of honor. And that's when she actually recommended Brené's book way back when. And that's when I was like, whoa, maybe this thing I've been using as a shield is really not what I thought it's been about this whole time. Like, I thought it's been about being the best I can be, when really it's been about that fear of rejection, like you were saying.
Oh, absolutely. And the badge of honor, because that's so reinforced, right? Especially in the workplace. You can put that on a resume and people will just eat it up. Like, yes, perfectionism. Yes, you're always on top of it. You never make a mistake. And if you do, you're going to berate yourself until you do a better job next time. And that's also what's reinforced from the home and growing up. And then you're going into the world, and then it's continuously reinforced. So there's so many layers of unblocking and choosing a different high self-worth belief that really suits our individual needs and desires and doesn't let our well-being fall to the back.
And I think if we really look at the root of this, Brené kind of touches on this in her synopsis, but it's, if I'm not perfect at X, then I will be rejected, unloved, abandoned. And when you start realizing all the ways that you're striving to be perfect, you're actually not striving to be perfect. You're striving to not be rejected, unloved, abandoned, etc. That is such a game changer. Even that reframe of, oh, I'm not striving to do the best I can on this because I just want to move the ball and, innovate and all this other stuff. I'm doing this because I'm afraid that if I don't do this, then I won't be loved.
Yeah. And then I am just bad. Like Brene Brown would say, right? Shame. It's just like, I am bad now. And it really doesn't allow you to, again, back to like when I was saying living life, like when you're trying to be perfect and trying to always just get approval, you're not going with what life is all about. Like, there's a detour. You have to pivot, you learn, you fall, you get up. And I think going back to the root, like if you're a kid and you were criticized, or you weren't allowed to make a mistake. You weren't allowed to say the wrong thing. You weren't allowed to wear this or be who you are. You weren't allowed to have that form of play and curiosity. And so as an adult, we have so many more resources now as an adult where we're like, okay, I can be perfect in so many more ways. But really it's because when you were a kid, most likely you weren't allowed to be a kid.
Yeah, let's get to some of these root examples of where this can stem from. So definitely if you come from a home system that values, grades, rule following, people pleasing, there's always the example they talk about in parenting where an adult tries to hug a child and the child's like, no. And the parent's like, that's rude. Hug that adult. And you're not really listening to the child's needs in that moment. So what the child's learning is my needs aren't important. It's polite and it's rude if I don't decide to hug this person. So even though I don't want to, I must do it. Otherwise it's rude. And so I think that's kind of one stem that it can come from, being, try to fit into society's rules. This is how we should live. This is how we should be. The school system, obviously, this is where a lot of that damage can take place for sure. Where else have you seen this come up, Salwa?
Yeah, I think the highly critical piece and like the not being able to live a life with reciprocity, I think of that Academy Award winning performance that we all say, we're just like, I just need to clone myself. If there were 3 of me, everything would just be perfect because the only person that can meet my standards is me, and I can barely even meet my standards. So I have to clone myself. And, I'm a Leo, like I respect some of that drama. But, but I think we could also really slow down the momentum of that impossible solution and this false performance of being like heroic, because no one, again, can meet our standards, and really leaning into a dynamic where there is giving and receiving and creating space for you to be and do what you are capable of, and also allowing others to do the same thing and allow that same opportunity. And, there's enough of that kind of play and adventure and curiosity and learning and relearning for everybody to do it together. And for like the overly critical piece, I grew up with a highly critical mom. And so I've had to really reparent myself in a way that allows me to make mistakes. And again, to have a beginner's mind and to show compassion for my inner child. When I track my progress, I can see it because the way I criticize other people has drastically changed, especially since starting to be magnetic. Because if you're constantly scrutinizing other people, that is most likely how you are speaking about yourself, which is also most likely familiar to you from how you were brought up or how it was modeled in your household.
I love that you say that, because the other side of that too is, as you are highly critical of others, let's say you do that in a group of friends, right? Now what you're indicating to those other friends is, this is where this person's standard's at. So if I don't want to be talked about like this, I must meet this person's standard too. And it has this trickle down effect. So even though we're holding ourselves to a certain standard in our heads, it inevitably spews out, because how can it not? And now it's having this ripple effect and putting that shame and fear and critical note on all of these other people's potentially self-talk. And it's one thing when you're around other adults, but it's another thing when, like, for example, for me, my mom was super supportive of everything I would do, but she was highly critical of herself. And so I learned, not by being implicitly told that I should do and be all these things. She always said supportive things and was my biggest advocate. But when she would speak poorly of herself, I absorbed, oh, it's not good to be like that, or I shouldn't be like that, or she's unhappy because she's like that. And so I took in all of those messages as well from that sort of trickle down effect.
Oh yeah, Jessica, that's such a great example, because I think that's something we all witness. And again, to your point, even if you weren't necessarily criticized in that way, but you're looking at this, your universe, right? Your caretaker, and that's the way that they are modeling the relationship they have with themselves, you're going to absorb all of that and take it as good or bad, or what you're going to have to strive to become in order to receive some type of love.
Totally. And then if I think about, my grandmother, she was super highly critical of herself. She was the quintessential definition of perfectionist in my mind. And so then now you see these sort of generations of, oh, this is how this messaging got passed down. And so even though my mom did an incredible job by saying, okay, no, I'm not going to use that critical voice towards my children, it still gets passed down pseudo. So it's like every generation is like peeling back different layers, which is kind of cool and gives you a lot of compassion for your family members who have felt a ton of pressure on them to perform in certain ways.
Yeah. And a really good reminder that like the best thing we can do to model what we want to pass on is to be that for ourselves, because you won't even have to try at that point. You will just be emanating this healthy relationship with yourself that you've broken free of, and that will radiate outwards and you won't even have to try.
Totally. So I'm going to run through some other checklist items just for people to be like, okay, I might be a perfectionist. I think I am in some ways and some I'm not. This was kind of eye-opening for me because it let me see all the ways it bleeds into different areas of my life. So being highly critical, a desire to excel and be the best in everything you do. Words like satisfactory, okay, or average feel like you've failed. Believe people will think less of you if you make a mistake. You tend to procrastinate. Cleanliness and order may be very important to you. You may find it hard to delegate or trust others to accomplish to your goals or standards. You sacrifice your own needs to make something perfect. Feel defensive when someone criticizes or corrects you. Have a feel of failure. Sets unrealistic goals and has unrealistic expectations. Find it hard to rest or relax without hitting all of your daily goals or tasks. Shrug off compliments and forget to celebrate their successes. So these are just some of the checkpoints for how perfectionism may be presenting in your life. Salwa, do any of these stand out more to you than others?
Yeah, definitely the one around a desire to excel and be the best in everything that you do. And something that I've really discovered, I want to call it like my up-leveled discovery, if you will, or like new reinforcement, only because we're talking about the home, right? Like how we are conditioned to be a perfectionist from our upbringing. And then I've also moved into shattering the idea of being perfect around the responsibility of excelling as a Black woman. And I think this is a really important layer to add because, again, you have the conditioning from the home and then a world outside of that that reinforces that I am other. And this has caused me, subconsciously and consciously to try to make up for this, right? Like you look like this, you act this way, and therefore you are not enough. So it's like, okay, well, how can I be perfect then? And what other ways can I make up for it? Talk like this in this space, wear my hair like this at this job, smile, don't sound aggressive, be strong. I mean, there are infinite things that I could put into this. But in other words, it's again, like be a machine for society, because it's constantly shown, who gets to fail upwards and who doesn't. So if I'm growing up seeing that like, well, I don't have the same grace allotted to me to fail upwards, I can't make a mistake because I am a Black woman. And so I'm done with that story. Like, Jessica, I'm so done with that story. And anyone that needs to hear this, like, I affirm that to you. And so when I choose to be myself and to feel and be human, I am reinforcing that I deserve to thrive, because there will always be something outside of us to tell you, you're not this, you're not that, be more. So we need to find our own internal peace. I'm not going to reinforce that same thing to myself and to my inner child. It is not my responsibility to be perfect on behalf of not only just me, but the entire like Black race due to other people's ignorance. Like, that's not my job. I have retired from that. And that's why it's so vital that I choose to be me and really evict all of that conditioning that comes from the greater outside world. And so, of course, it starts at the root, but then also the world that I live in and like, what is my responsibility? And like, I'm not going to feed what I can't control, especially other people, but I can take charge of what I'm telling to myself and what I'm reinforcing for me and my inner child.
Oh, I love that so much. I also want to reflect back to like how much power and authenticity I hear in your voice, just claiming that for yourself. That is so beautiful.
Thank you. It feels good.
Yes. I think you also bring up such a good point in that, in which it's obviously damaging no matter how you look at, where you picked up the need to feel perfect. But we also have to acknowledge that there are situations in society, whether that's racially, whether that's abuse in the home front. So it's one thing to feel shame, but it's another thing to feel like if I am not perfect in this, I have a real risk of my life being threatened. And I think that adds a whole nother layer on top of this, and trying to say, okay, that's great. I want to release the perfectionism, but like, where do I even begin? Because for so long, I've attributed the need to be perfect in this way for my survival. Our nervous system is wired to protect us. And if it thinks we're in danger, it's going to do what it needs to do to protect us. So I think that's another really real piece to look at with all of this as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I think because I asked myself too, like, okay, who profits from me acting this way? Because it's not me. It's usually whether that's society, corporations, businesses. It's like, who is profiting from me trying to achieve something that I will never achieve because it's not even my desire? So it's like kind of walking that back and then finding those spaces, hopefully, that you can start small, like with expanders and community and people that you feel safe with, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge thing right away. But like, how can you start small and how can you show up authentically as you in a space that you feel protected to begin, and then going from there?
Yeah, it really kind of is that 1% difference in peeling back, because with all reprogramming, we're changing our neural architecture. We're going in and giving ourselves healing in spaces where we may have had a lot of pain and suffering in the past. But in doing so, it's shifting our brain bit by bit. And it's also shifting our actions bit by bit, noticing where these things are coming up, implementing a different choice, understanding that to buck the norm of wanting to be a perfectionist all the time, you're going to run up against a really uncomfortable feeling. You're going to feel like you're doing something wrong when you put your work down when the day is over, instead of finishing and obsessing over the wording on that last email. You're going to feel like you failed because that's how your body has trained you to feel. But it's just bit by bit over time, chipping away until you realize, okay, I can feel like this, but it's just a feeling and it can pass. And now I'm okay. And I'm actually honoring myself by doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And like that fear of people thinking less of you, right? Your nervous system, like, oh my God, like, what are they going to say? What are they going to think? Like, they're going to label me as this. But I think also another way to step that back too is, especially around if you're afraid to make a mistake, sometimes I ask myself, like, whose voice is that? Because sometimes we say, everyone's going to think this. If I don't do it perfect, everyone. And then it's like, okay, first, let's stop the train for a second. Who is everyone? And sometimes walking that back, I find that helpful for me, because sometimes it's like, oh, that's my mom's voice. That's not coming from me. Or if it is actually my voice, it's from an experience where I actually needed love and I got something different. So I think kind of walking that backwards from this bigger fear and like, where's it really coming from, to find the root, so that when something is in front of you, you can actually say, like, I know where this comes from. This is from this experience from my childhood. That's actually not what's happening right now, but I can hold space for both and then take an action that really serves me.
So let's jump into one of the teachings from Lacy. Can you talk more about fear of failure and visibility?
Yes, this is a good one. So for those out there, if we're doing the unblocked workshops, but we're not following up in the conscious space, meaning pushing through our fears, or like in shadow, for instance, if we're not outing ourselves and, really, really owning the stuff we're most insecure about, it doesn't matter. Like, you have to have one with the other in order to see the momentum. So I'm going to reiterate that the conscious state of doing things when we're just in our conscious daily lives, no matter how much we're reprogramming on the subconscious, has to be done as well in order to see like the big impact of difference. So for you, it would be starting with the small things you're really fucking afraid of when it comes to being seen, and just pushing through them and realizing you're safe at the other side and it's okay. And that's how you begin to build.
So essentially, why this really relates to perfectionism is oftentimes where we are afraid to fail and afraid to be seen. It's leaning into that perfectionist tendency. It's leaning into, oh, but if I'm seen for doing this or being like this, then I won't be taken seriously, or I won't be credible, or whatever the long list of things is for yourself. And the truth is, where you're hiding is kind of like a weak spot for you because you're working so hard subconsciously to cover up this thing that you feel is bad or negative. And once you can integrate that, then you don't have this weak spot energetically there because you're not afraid of it. You know that all humans are flawed and have different strengths and weaknesses, and nothing is damaging, and what's meant for you is meant for you. So leaning a lot into that. And I think it also brings up this really good point of perfectionism tricks us into thinking that we need it to appear the top of whatever we're doing, but really it's a block against our success.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is, right? Because wherever you're hiding, there's a story there that owns you. And like we all say, what you don't own owns you. And so when you're able to really claim that story for yourself and get out of hiding, and you're like, hey, world, this is me, good, bad, all of the things, right? All of the denied aspects, all of the shadow, and that you embrace that there is trial and error. And you might fall and you might get up, but you've learned something from that. And then you keep going, but you're still showing up authentically as you. It's so much better to quote unquote fail or to not have an outcome that you wanted, but you showed up as yourself. I mean, how many times have we tried to show up as perfect and we still got shit for it? And it's so frustrating because you're like, wait, I did all of that. I didn't sleep last night. I did all of these things that nobody asked me to do that I need for, my own like insecurity and all the things that we haven't unblocked. And you still get flack. Like there's still something wrong. And then you try and work 10 times harder and it's not sustainable. So it's like, at least if you go out of hiding and you do something and maybe it didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, that's okay. But you were yourself. That's such a softer landing because then it's you, right? And I think having that practice slowly but surely of getting out of hiding will really, it builds that trust muscle and that courage within yourself to like keep going.
And not to keep throwing it back to Brene, but she had a really good other quote on this from the book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Research shows that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it is often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. Life paralysis refers to all the opportunities we miss because we're too afraid to put anything out in the world that could be imperfect. It's a terrifying risk when you're a perfectionist because your self-worth is on the line. I mean, whew.
Yeah.
I think also another thing that is helpful when unpacking and understanding the perfectionism, because there was a part, at least for me, when I first started pulling all the layers back, that didn't want to let go of the perfectionism. Like consciously I did. I knew it wasn't good for me. I knew it was making me stressed and overwhelmed. But a part of me was like, but I can't lose it. This feels like my edge, or keeps me on top of things, or keeps me safe, or I can't lose it. Like I don't want to let it go. A part of me did not want to be different. It didn't see how letting go of these things would get me closer to what I wanted. I think when you realize that it is exactly the thing that's keeping you from what you wanted, that it is causing all of these negative things, that it's keeping you from your highest self, your authenticity, and you can reframe it to understand this thing you thought was safety was not safety, then real changes can start to be made.
Yes, absolutely. If your self-worth is on the line, as Brene says, and it's entangled with the perfectionism, like that's not a situation where you're going to win. And not wanting to let go of it too is that like trying to control. Because I think for me, when I think of, oh, I can't let go of being a perfectionist, it's because I go to the other extreme side of that, well, I'm not going to trust myself. Everything's just going to go to shit. The wheels are off the bus and I'm not going to be able to keep anything together. You know, we like jump from one extreme to like the other and not seeing that there's so many other ways to balance that out. So I think it's also that lack of trust where if I'm not controlling this so tightly every second, everything is going to blow up in my face. And I'm not going to be able to properly care for the things that I am overly committing to right now. So I think I like jump to that other extreme because I think if I'm not a perfectionist, then what's the opposite of that? Oh my gosh, I'm going to be a mess. I'm not going to have my things together. And we need to actually realize that there are other options. And even if you go to that other side, that's okay. You can see what happens and then you can find another checkpoint that is a little bit of both and allows you to have inner peace.
Because it's the balance, right? Like the real magical space is in the balance. Like we do not want to be in such control that we can't let things go. But that also doesn't mean that we never show up for our responsibilities or work or self-care or anything like that. We're just kind of, aloof and not doing anything. We don't need all the control in order to still show up and do what we want to do authentically to ourselves. It's finding that balance of, okay, where have I hit my limits? And noticing that you have limits instead of completely overriding and bypassing them. Noticing when you're fatigued or overworked or maybe just really ruminating on something. Is that a limit for you? Did you hit an emotional limit? And do you need to kind of take it back a notch and figure out how to regroup and ground and do some self-care in order to get back to a state where you can give more?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
Okay, so let's dive a little bit into people pleasing because people pleasing is an element of perfectionism. It still, I think, garners its own conversation because they're kind of in similar lanes, I would say. It's like a web of everything around boundaries, and perfectionism is boundaries with ourselves and with others, and people pleasing is definitely boundaries with others. So according to Merriam-Webster, people pleasing is defined as a person who has an emotional need to please others, often at the expense of his or her own desires. So people pleasing can look like having a difficulty saying no to people because you don't want to let them down, putting others' needs before your own, agreeing to a commitment without checking in with your own desires first, pretending to agree with others, the yes person, even though their internal dialogue is telling them that they don't agree or they don't like something, apologizing when we feel socially awkward or disliked, even if you haven't done anything wrong, taking on others' emotions deeply to the point of burdening yourself, finding it hard to accept a compliment or praise, mirroring closely the person's desires around you. So you're kind of reflecting back exactly who this person is because you're not sure or you're afraid to be yourself. Desire that everyone around you like you, even people you may not know or like yourself. You may be avoidant, avoid conflict and confrontation, afraid to speak your needs, and struggle with authenticity. So how have you seen people pleasing come up for you or clients or friends or any of those things?
Yes, years of experience on this one, sacrificing myself for others. And it really kept me from intimately knowing me, right? You can't know yourself because all of your energy is going towards other people. And it's really hard to have a secure relationship with yourself or even think of that as being important or a priority or a necessity. And so if you don't know yourself, how can you show up authentically and create space for what you're even calling in, right? You can't. And this work is meant to guide us back to our authentic selves. And people pleasing is just, that runaway codependent train. And for me, I'm sure for so many, something occurred in childhood where you had to begin taking care of someone else, maybe physically, emotionally. I had emotionally absent parents, especially my father, my older brother. There was addiction, and being a kid and witnessing these things happening and feeling them so deeply, but also you're a kid, so you can only know so much, and not having the space or support because, your caretakers are consumed with their own unresolved issues. So, you hold this on your own and try to find a solution to mend the chaos. So not having that support for me as a kid and personally holding on to the burden of, my parents' distress. As I get older, that energy, it doesn't go away. Maybe it lays dormant for a little bit, but then it gets transferred. So situations that hold that familiar weight of love and security, I would handle them the same way that I did as a child, which was sacrificing myself. So I did it in relationships and with work. But now I'm an adult, so I have more ways to sacrifice myself, and feeling as if I have to be the one to solve the problem and needs of others, and not being able to detach, genuinely helping someone from a healthy place versus the responsibility of an outcome that I have no control over. And I mean, Jessica, I'm sure you know this, but with people pleasing, it does feel good to solve life for people. It feels good, right? I'm not going to pretend that it hasn't for so long. That's why I kept doing it. And it's mostly likely because I wasn't able to solve the issues when I was a child for my parents, and so I was never able to solve what I perceived as the pain and trajectory of my dad's life after my parents separated and having no one to lean on. So as an adult, if I can succeed and get this temporary relief that, oh, I did it, I kept something together, that's filling that void. So, we look for the next thing and the next person to like us. And that energy just kind of lingers until you choose to really look at it and do something about it. And so for me, it's a constant reminder, what is my responsibility and what is not? And to make sure that I'm not avoiding myself when I do give and show up. And so, that it's from a real whole place.
I resonate with that so much. And I think that's really common for a lot of children in dynamics with their parents where they've either been enmeshed or parentified or just the caretaker of their parents' needs, and kind of peeling that back a bit more. As children, obviously we care about our parents and we don't want to see them in pain. But the other layer that is occurring there is if mom and dad can't take care of themselves, then they can't take care of me, the child. So I, as a child, in order to get my needs met, must take care of them so they are feeling okay, so then they can take care of me and I'll be safe. And it's so common in alcoholic, addiction, all of those dynamics with parents that occurs as well. And it really lays into the codependency, but also this people pleasing, this I must caretake the persons around me needs in order to be safe in this situation. The fear root is I must caretake others before taking care of my own needs. Otherwise, I won't be safe, I'll be rejected, unloved, abandoned. Or the root could be, if so-and-so is okay, then I will be okay. It's really, really deeply rooted in those inner child dynamics. And again, it's kind of that same path of how can we start to inch by inch go back to safety without needing to caretake someone else's needs? And how can we notice when we're doing this?
Yeah. And how can we make space to trust? Because again, you displayed it so beautifully, but being a child and you don't trust your parents have it together. So if I can help them get it together, they will help me. So if you're in life now and you see someone, you are lacking trust in them to have it together or for them to find a solution. So you need to do it so that they will be safe and then you will be safe. It doesn't allow a space for you to give the possibility for someone else to recognize where they need to go, that they have the tools, they have the means, they will ask if they need to, and you can check in with yourself to actually see what is the bandwidth that you have and what can you actually give that isn't depleting yourself and isn't going to lead to resentment. But it's that reciprocity, like everyone is their own individual. And sometimes when we're people pleasing, and I know I have in the past, I see this person as like helpless, like, okay, I automatically need to help them. I don't trust that they're going to figure it out without me. And then it's like kind of this self-serving thing when it's like, no, actually they can. And we also have to let people figure that out and stand beside them, but from a way that is not also robbing them of figuring it out too.
100%. I mean, if you think back of your own life, all of the ways that you've likely grown the most is when you face some sort of difficult situation and overcame it and we're on the other side of it. You know, that's really where we learn so much about ourselves. And so it's kind of this idea of like, who am I to rob that from someone else just because I think I know the answers? Sure, if someone's asking for help and you have the bandwidth and emotional capacity to support them, continue check in with yourself, make sure that still feels comfortable and aligned, go for it. But to caretake to such an extreme degree that we're now depleted, we're really not serving anyone, even the person that we're trying to help in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not the person that you most likely were unable to help. Like for me, it's like, okay, this isn't my dad. And it's obvious, but sometimes through this journey and with TBM, I've had to stop myself and say, this is not this situation. And what's left over from my childhood and what I haven't looked at is what's spewing into what I can fix here, but that's not what this is. And having to really stop myself. And again, what is the root? What is this situation or dynamic reminding me of from my childhood experience so that I can use discernment on how to move forward and know like what is mine to still look at and what isn't.
Definitely. So let's go into another teaching from Lacy. When I have my family and personal financial needs to think of, how do you say no to clients who are demanding and breaking agreement rules?
So here's the deal. Even when you were young, before you had kids, you had financial fears or fears in general that got you into this position. You've always had a fear of saying no. So back then it could have been like, oh my God, I have to work this job because I have to make rent. If I don't make rent, then I'll be homeless. So don't use your kids and looking after them, which is very important to do, as an excuse to addressing your no. That's just one thing I always say to clients. It's like they can't be your reason that you are not self-developing, because in order for you to be the parent they need, the model they need, the reflection they need to be their whole most magnetic selves, because your number one job is parenting them, is that you can do that first in yourself. So I'm kind of hard on my clients that way, in a loving way. But here's the deal. I always get people asking me like boundaries and no and all of this stuff, but the true energetic of learning how to be a no person is when you have nothing else you fear to lose. That's the energy. That's when you have the magnetism. You can say no freely, take it or leave it, because you don't care if it goes. So starting to really develop your no power might not be with this job because in your mind the stakes are too high with your children and having to provide for them as well as having a job. However, when you do exercise that no muscle in other aspects of your life, so again, like think back to the Janis Joplin song, I'm paraphrasing, but like the closest thing to freedom is nothing left to lose. That is no. That's the energetic of no. So really looking at your life to see where you can exercise that, where you don't really care if you lose this little thing. Maybe it's an acquaintance. If you say, no, I can't make it out to this thing tonight, start to exercise that muscle, really start to see how powerful it feels, and that not a lot of bad stuff really happens when you do exercise that muscle. This is when you start to own your power. I really learned this in dating, and I really learned it against Tess, truthfully, because I was the biggest people pleaser, so afraid to say no to anything. I'm a child of an alcoholic. Like, no was the hardest thing to me. But every time I started to say it, when I got fed up with something, even though I was like, oh, I'm losing the best opportunity of my life, cool things came through right away and happened. So starting to really play and exercise that outside of the work, and then you are going to have to take it into the work. These clients are taking advantage of you because they can. They have nothing to lose, right? They can just replace you or X, Y, and Z. I don't know the energetic behind it because we're not in session, but you're needing to change that circumference around to learn how you have nothing else to lose in your position. This goes for dating, this goes for attracting in a house, this goes for attracting in a job, everything. So for you specifically, at some point, you are going to want to set up other clients in place when you have exercised this no muscle around your life and you feel pretty comfortable with it, and you have that trust muscle pretty strong that when you do say no, eventually something else better shows up in its space. Then you'll want to start to implement it into the work, your actual work with these clients. You'll want to put other clients in the place that don't take advantage of your time, and then you're going to want to basically give these ones ultimatums. So if they push around your energy, it's just going to be something as simple as like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm too busy with X, Y, and Z, so I understand if you have to go elsewhere. Giving them those types of, and it doesn't have to be that wordage, but that's the energetic behind it, that you don't fear losing them. All the power's in your court then, and then it's all the magnetism as well that you're projecting out there.
So what I really love about this one is it feels like, well, two things. One, I love Lacy's insight on don't let your outside responsibilities be the reason that you're not at least striving to take steps towards taking care of your people pleasing and putting your boundaries in place. But two, the idea of moving past people pleasing and energetically and magnetically for manifestation is moving into this, I must appease others for validation, and taking your self-worth back and saying, my time and space is valuable and the most valuable thing, and I honor that taken care of first. Because if I can't take care of me, I can't take care of anyone else. So I must honor the spaces in which I authentically need to take care of myself. And that energetic is so magnetic and will allow things to come through to you and manifestations to come through. I think that's kind of like an exciting way to think about pulling back the layers of the people pleasing.
Yes, no makes me glow. That's my favorite tagline.
I love that.
And I also love her example because, and I tell this to my clients all the time, the biggest thing that's at stake where you're like, okay, I can't just say no to this thing at work, and we're spiraling, we're freaking out because that is just so out of the realm of possibility. But take the focus out of the main thing that's so fearful. You're probably people pleasing in so many other areas. Where can you create magnetism? Someone asks you to do something and you don't want to do it with a friend. You say, no, thank you. I'm busy. No disclaimer. You don't have to tell why. That's a big thing with people pleasing. Giving a whole background and novel of like why you can't do it to make sure they don't think something ill of you. No is a full sentence. No, I'm unavailable. How about X? Like that could feel really scary to someone. But if you're comparing it to something with a higher stake, like that is attached to your livelihood or your money, security, start somewhere a little bit smaller so you can begin to that trust muscle of, oh, I can say no. And I survived. Okay, let's try it again, and it all has this compounding effect to get to the bigger no's that are going to like really rock that boat. But you've already started to create that proof for yourself that you don't have to be timid of your own voice and your own needs. And you have other ways to start practicing smaller, and it will pan out for the bigger things in the end.
And I think that's kind of a really hopeful message for people listening in on this, is that going up against our perfectionism or going up against our people-pleasing mentality can be really scary and hard, and it feels like a lot to unpack. But know on the other side of you honoring yourself and putting yourself first, you will be rewarded. That's why I say, like, people who are going through this work, it's so important to have a notebook listing when any manifestation comes through. Just like write the date and write what comes through, even if it's, I got a free coffee, or I found parking right away at this place that I usually have to circle around forever. It just, even the tiniest little thing, I saw my favorite bird outside the window this morning. All of these things are showing you that you're being honored for being authentic to you. And know that, yes, it's difficult, but there is hope and joy on the other side of this currently difficult feeling.
Oh, absolutely. And before you know it, you wake up and you're like, wow, I used to be a really big people pleaser. And there is a time where you break free of that in such a way that you shock yourself, and you can get there, and all of those small steps and all of those wins that you write down, and you celebrate yourself and celebrate, even if you did something and you're like, I said no, but I gave a disclaimer. I still said no. That's still a good first step, and the next time you say no, you won't have a disclaimer, and that's still a good next step. So just like keep going, and eventually you're going to be a whole new person. You're going to be so much more free, and you're really inviting other people to do the same thing. Because once you free yourself from that, you're also able to hold other people's boundaries, right? In a beautiful way. You're going to encourage other people to do that. You want to have relationships, I'm assuming, where people are showing up authentically as them and not trying to please your well-being, and their happiness is contingent on what you think. Like, that's not healthy. I don't think that that's what we want for someone else, but we're also deserving of that same thing.
And even just to give an example of kind of the evolution of how this has shown up for me, let's say we're hanging out with a bunch of friends on a vacation, right? There's a bunch of people there. If I want time to be alone, in the past, I would have felt the ping to be alone, and then everyone would want to do a group thing, and I would ignore that ping and do the group thing because I thought that's what I should do or I'm supposed to do. The next version of that for me was, I have a call I need to make. I'm not able to go with you guys on this little excursion. I'm going to go make this call. So I kind of would make up a little bit of a lie in order to carve out that space for me. A lie that felt like they couldn't push against. They couldn't convince me otherwise because, sorry, this is an outside obligation. It's not up to me. I had this call. That felt safe to do as kind of like the middle ground. And now I'm at a place where I can say, oh, that sounds so fun. I am actually craving a little bit of alone time. So I'm going to go on a walk by myself without shame or guilt or fear. And so it took me a little while to get there, but it's step by step doing the neural reprogramming, envisioning myself saying this and getting a good reaction in the deep imaginings, and then taking the action in real life to work towards it.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good example, Jessica. And that inspires me to give one too around relationships, because my partner, we work on all of these things and then we find new teachers, even if it's the people we love, that really, test that people pleasiness. Because I'm like, oh, well, I don't people please now in maybe work dynamics or friendships, but now I have this new partner who I love. And so for me, it's also been, if he's going through something, and we've had we talk about everything, but open conversations where, I had to say like, oh, my gut reaction right now is to solve this problem for you because that's what I know. And like, I need to step away. And I really believe that you have the answer to this. And we've talked about it a few times. And this is what I can give to you right now. And this is what I know is healthy for me. And having that dialogue too, which is great because obviously we're in a relationship, it's supportive and trusting that other person to hear you. But I think also allowing yourself to know that, man, this still might come up a different way. And how can you voice it, even if you don't necessarily, even if you are working through the thing in real time, I'm like, hey, I want to do this, but I can't right now. So anyone who is maybe dealing with wanting to solve their partner's problem and to fix it for them, and how you can kind of step back and have that open dialogue that doesn't have to be your first reaction. And how can you encourage each other's autonomy and helping each other in a healthy space that isn't trying to fix the other person.
Ooh, I resonate with that one so much. That was definitely a learning curve. And it almost was like a 1-2 punch for me, because the people pleaser wanted to be there and listen and fix, and the perfectionist wanted to fix in a certain way. The perfectionist was like, this is the right solution. You must do this. And I cannot relax until you do exactly this. And I had to just pull back. I had to pull back, and I had to honor that and have a very similar dialogue to what you're saying, Salwa, and say, you know what? I know you can get through this, and I cannot control the outcome of this. And who the heck am I to say that I have the only or right answer to this? So I'm going to let you solve this on your own.
Stop the train, get off.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yes, that's a good example.
But all of these things were autopilot. These were just, this is where I would go with things. So to actually take a pause and be like, what's happening here? Why am I doing this? Why don't I feel good after these interactions? Or why do I feel depleted after these interactions? How can I start honoring myself more? So important. And we can kind of end on this last little teaching by Lacy. What is the balance between committing to our growth and to the TBM practice while letting go and trusting the universe? I have certainly been doing the work and can feel my manifestation is coming. I'm not stressed about my FU fund shrinking down, and I feel more entrusted in my heart and feel the need to take it a bit easier. I think this is a really good teaching, because so many people, if they are a perfectionist or people pleaser, apply that to doing self-care work. They feel they need to be rigid in how, they do the TBM work, or even their meditation practice or whatever it is. And they become very fixated on it has to be done the right way. There is no right way. Spoiler alert. It has to be done in this way. Oh my gosh, I failed a test. What do I do? There's so much rigidity into it. And so here's Lacy's insight on that.
100%. If you're getting that ping, that's exactly what you should be doing. It sounds like you're in the process now, kind of magic darky, maybe not full magic dark, but a little bit of that energy where it's time to kind of really ground into who you are, how you are, what you're doing, and really start to feel into the intuition of things. And then the work's there to go back to. Or simultaneously, if you feel like, I don't want to fully let go of the work right now, just do the one DI you're supposed to be doing right now while you're in the rut. Just do that daily DI twice a day, and don't put any other pressure on yourself to do the work. Because sometimes energetically, when we're trying to control our experience by overdoing work too much, what that also energetically is signaling is like, we don't have self-worth and we don't believe that we're going to get out of this, so I have to do this because I don't trust the universe. That's what that projects. So if you're getting that download where you're like, I need to trust the universe a little bit more, and you want to stay committed to a practice that's very non-invasive and allows you to just be in your subconscious and trust, I would just be doing that daily reinforcement exercise from Up Level. And listen to that intuition. You'll certainly get the pull back to needing to dig deeper in other stuff when the time's right.
So I think with this one, Lacy really clearly explains how when we are needing to control the process, it's signaling energetically that we don't trust the universe. And we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust that the right situation will be put in front of us. And a lot of times when this is happening, when perfectionism is happening, when people pleasing is happening, we're not listening to the cues that we're getting. We're not listening to our pings. We're not listening to our bodies. We're just brute force through the entire process. And it really is an invitation to slow down when you notice it coming up, and really start to check in with yourself. What do I really want? What do I really crave? what would make me feel so good in this moment? And try to get yourself to that place. If you're like, what would make me feel really good is $1 million. Okay, but what's the energy behind that? You want that for what? Security. It would feel really good right now to feel secure. Okay, how can I just take a moment and breathe and remember times that I have felt secure before? Start leaning into that stuff, because that's really your key of navigating how to get out of here.
Yeah. And to your point, that perfectionism, the people pleasing, your intuition is just suffocating underneath all of those things. You can't hear anything because you're just listening to what people want of you, what you're not doing, what you're not getting, what you need to receive from somebody else, that you're not listening to that voice. It's like, hey, everything's okay. Oh, you actually feel calm. Oh, this is a new feeling for you. I mean, doing nothing for a perfectionist can feel like, skydiving. And that's something that's really terrifying for me. So whatever the equivalent is for you, that's like sounds scary. I don't know, like swimming with sharks. It can feel so like, oh my gosh, I can't just do nothing. But that can actually be another really magnetic action step for you to trust that you've done enough, and that you also need time for your mind and body to like catch up to everything that you've done. And that's where the magic happens. It's like when you go in the shower and all of a sudden you connect all the dots, those moments, Jessica, and you're like, wow, I can't believe it. And you're not expecting it, but it's like, you also need to allow that space and slowing down and not stripping away all of the magic that could come your way if you weren't so fixated on how it needs to be done and when it needs to happen.
What is one thing that you would tell your younger inner child perfectionist and people pleaser, Salwa?
Oh, wow. That's such, my heart is, I feel it in my heart. I don't have words. I would tell young Salwa that she belongs. And I would tell her that you are safe to express the things that are coming naturally to you. Ultimately, when we're people pleasing or trying to be perfect, we just want to remember that we belong somewhere, but we're usually trying to fit into something that doesn't fit or doesn't work. And we forget that we actually just belong to ourselves, and leaning into that. And I think from childhood, that just gets taken away from you. You're just trying to fit in where the love is and whatever you need to become to get it. And so I would tell her that she doesn't need to look for any of those things. Like, she already belongs, like, forever. And so it's safe to just express from that place and allow that to change. Like, you can change your mind. You can change the way you're expressing yourself. We are human. Like, we have so much range. We should never confine ourselves to one thing, and we should never confine another person to one thing. What would you say?
Oh, what would I say? You are safe to take care of yourself first. And also, you're not rejected if you are alone. I think that was a big one for me, because I always say I was an only child for 8 years until my sister was born. But, 8 years of not having a sibling felt like being an only child for a long time. And there was a lot of, if I'm by myself, I'm not good enough. If I'm not alone or with a sibling, I'm not good enough. And that also caused me to be, not take alone time, which everybody needs. And finally, having integrated all of that, I feel like, that note of you can carve your own path and do your own thing and go it solo sometimes. And you are so worthy and so awesome and so valued, and it doesn't detract from anything.
Yes, it's safe to choose you. Oh my gosh, can we hug?
Yes, I know, seriously. I love this. Oh, so good. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It has been an honor chatting with you, Salwa. I love all of your insights, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. And we have another 5-star rating winner for the month. June's winner for a 1-year free membership to the Pathway is Liz in LA. From single mom to partnered. I found this podcast in 2017. At that point, I had been divorced from my ex-husband and single momming it 3 kids in Los Angeles for 3 years. I was desperately trying to do the work on myself and figure out what part I played in my failed marriage and how to heal in order to be the best parent possible to my kids. I did yoga daily, meditated, read all the self-help books, read tarot cards, went to church. Yes, all these things simultaneously. But I still felt confused about my own behavior and motivations and at a loss on how to change them. When I first heard the podcast, I immediately knew I had hit on something important. I bought the Unblock Shadow workshop and worked on it relentlessly over the summer. I was blown away at how much came out of my subconscious during the deep imaginings and how easy it was to identify triggers and patterning from childhood that I had previously been aware of. 1 month later, I was invited on a camping trip with a guy friend, which ended up bringing us closer. A year later, we moved in together, and a year after that, we moved out of California and to North Carolina, along with my ex-husband and his current wife, to jointly start a new life in a smaller mountain town, all the things I was calling in. I now co-parent smoothly with my ex and his new family, and I am in my self-worth enough to not feel jealous or triggered by his success. Now I know this stuff works. I cannot recommend this work enough. I really love this one because the theme of our episode last week was, how to parent and show up for, not just your kids, for anyone who's not a parent out there, but also your family and friends in general, the best. And it truly comes down to working on yourself first and foremost. And I think this is such a testament of that. This person was trying all these other modalities, and there's nothing wrong with other healing modalities. I think you just have to listen to what works for you. And she really committed to this work, especially in the shadow work, and has manifested her entire list and feeling way more integrated and authentic since. So Liz in LA, you can reach out to us on Intercom and we will set you up with 1 free year membership. For those who want to be entered for next month, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and we will choose a new winner next month. Have a great one, everyone.